me start with introducing myself. I'm Ashish Bhatt. I've been with the BCS since 2012, so it's been 10 years. I immigrated to Canada in 2019 when I joined the BCS Canada section. I'm serving on the committee of the BCS Canada section as a social media officer, and it's my pleasure to introduce the speaker for today. He's a good friend, past colleague of mine from the University of the West Indies. So Darren Dore is a digital anthropologist with CyberSafeTT, which is a not-for-profit organization based in Trinidad. And they've been doing really great work, fantastic work in Trinidad and the Caribbean region, and also internationally. And I'll let Darren speak more about CyberSafeTT, but it's a completely volunteer-driven organization. So they've been, I believe they were founded in 2010, Darren, and so they have been active for the last 10 years and going strong. And I just wanted to congratulate Darren for that. And I'll let you take it away, Darren.
Okay.
You can introduce CyberSafeTT and yourself.
Great, sounds good. Thanks, Ashish, and thanks, Stuart, and thanks to BCS for having CyberSafeTT. It's another country that I can add to the list of countries that I have shared, my message with. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to reach as far as Germany, Portugal, Spain. It was really fantastic to sit in on a presentation with all the translations happening, and me having to remind myself to stop speaking this fast because of my Trini accent. So I will try my best to speak slowly so that everyone will understand. CyberSafeTT, as Ashish said, is a non-profit organization. We're registered in Trinidad and Tobago. We have been doing this work since 2010, which is essentially speaking to parents, teachers, and of course, our main stakeholders, students, on being safe on the internet. We speak about internet addiction, cyberbullying, social media etiquette, the whole works. As we all know, it's widely needed, and even since 2010, I saw that need. Much less so, post-pandemic, when we were just met with an avalanche of reasons why we needed to continue having these conversations. So I know Stuart indicated that you guys would have had in-person presentations, but over the last 2 years, I've had the privilege of sharing this information through the virtual space, just as we are doing today, with the Caribbean region, because prior we wouldn't have even, it's so interesting, we would not have even fathomed having sessions like this virtually, and now it's par for the course. And I think it has had its advantages, even though I do welcome the opportunity, Stuart and Ashish, if I can be invited to Toronto to do a face-to-face session, we'll see how we can get that going. So I know we have some key things that we would want to touch on today. So let me begin by sharing my screen so we can start off the presentation. All right, so just give me a nod when you know that you're sharing when you see my screen there.
So, Darren, just before you begin that, I just wanted to lay some ground rules. So what we're doing is a bit of an interactive discussion, Darren and I. That's the format that we'll be following today. If you could please hold your questions till the end, or what you can do is that if you've got a burning question, you can put it in the chat. Andrew will be monitoring the chat and he'll be asking the questions at the end on behalf of everyone. And please at all times keep your mics on mute. In the past, we've had issues with that, so please, everyone who's not presenting, please put your mic on mute now, please. Thanks. Okay.
Great, thanks, Ashish. And of course, this session will be recorded. So I know that we would have had a lot of folks who would have registered, and they'll be able to see the recordings, and even those who have attended will be able to review what we would have shared today. So we do have a lot of information that we want to share in a short amount of time. And as Ashish said, it's really a conversation. So this is not just, a series of slides. But I'm hoping that, the audience will be able to take away some sort of message, tips on how to be a parent, a guardian in the digital world. If not, it will probably get easier once kids grow up and have kids of their own. No, just kidding. Just be reassured that, there are many other parents and or guardians who have, similar concerns. I have had, a lot of sessions like this on topics related. And one of the first things I like to start off is, reassuring parents is that, you are not alone. And, this first slide will really bring that home a bit. It's not your problem alone, because you are probably in the minority if your kids aren't using every waking minute behind the screen. Ashish, I think both you and I can attest to that, right? I mean, every time we look to our left or right, our kids' faces are probably in some sort of screen, right?
So, Darren, these are some really tremendous statistics, right? And to be honest with you, you were in my shoes a few years ago. Your kids have grown up. Mine is still at 7, and she's on the phone and the tablet all the time, right? And I think the digital world is accelerating at a faster pace than my parenting strategies are. But just give us an idea of what does this mean? Why are these statistics important?
Yeah, I like how you put that. The digital world is accelerating faster than our parental capabilities. If you don't mind, I could probably quote that and maybe give you some credit going forward, because I think that's a brilliant way of putting it down. And look at this, look at these statistics. For TikTok, which is, I think, probably one of the more popular platforms now, between the ages of 10 to 25, there are 37.8 million users. So, I mean, that's our teen base, right? That's our young adult base, right? There are 5 billion snaps created every day. Billion, that's not million. It's an attestment to the amount of usage that we have. And when we really ask ourselves the question, what is it that our kids are doing behind the screen all the time? Online gaming has become, part for the course. It has really replaced what we might have done in the past, go outside and play some football or soccer or cricket or whatever that sport might be. Now that sport is actually right here in front of us. And there is also Instagram, which I thought this was a pretty surprising statistic, that most of the Instagram users are between the ages of 13 and 17. I actually thought that was an older user base. Now, these statistics, and you'll see in a few of my slides, wherever any statistics are made, have actually come from very reputable sources. Now, why are we sharing this? Is, to me, I think it gives all parents and guardians a sense of reassurance that, hey, it's not just me alone, and it's not just my kid. There are 37.8 million TikTok users that are between the ages of 10 to 25. So chances are the neighbors' kids and my nieces and nephews are probably also experiencing these same challenges. And knowledge is power. Knowing what we can find out from the data and the statistics and users really does help us to probably strategize the best way forward.
Darren, so tell me, what's the negative impacts of that overuse of screen time?
Yeah, and of course, with this amount of users and that amount of time spent, there will definitely be some negative issues. And to be honest with you, we could probably have a whole presentation just on the negative impacts of social media. But I want to set the record straight. Cyber Safety has always been one to speak about the bad, but also promote the good as well, right? Because there are quite a lot of good things that happen on social media, and we'll probably see that in the next slide. But to answer that question in terms of the negative effects, I think internet addiction is something that a lot of us believe that we might be susceptible to, even adults, but we may not necessarily know, and there are ways in which we can determine that. Interestingly enough, I do have an internet addiction test on my website, cybersafety.com. And I would encourage anyone listening on, and you can share that test with folks. And I'll probably share the link after in the chat. You can actually go and actually conduct that test. Why is internet addiction something that we have to be concerned about? You see, it can actually take away from real world activities. It can actually affect us mentally, physically. Sometimes it creates a distortion of reality. So we have young users looking in on these platforms. And let's take Instagram for an example. You would find on Instagram, there are other celebrities posting up what I like to refer to as very well curated images These are images that seem perfect. It's the lighting is impeccable, and what they wear is best brands and so on. And you would have younger users looking in on and comparing, and it can present levels of depression. It can bring about mental health issues. So it's not their reality, right? It's done so from an entirely monetary perspective. These celebrities are often paid to make those posts. But a young user, preteens and teens as well, they may not necessarily understand that, and they may think, wow, that's the real life, and I can't get there, and it has a whole sort of negative implications. I think also being behind the screen too much really hinders on physical and social development issues. Over the last couple of years, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, I think that maybe has grown significantly, that it's not out of our reach to bring back in, but we have to be very well aware of it. Even right here in the workplace, members of staff are questioning coming back to work. I prefer to work at home, but there are also benefits of being in a physical environment, interacting with human beings, interacting with one another, right? That social element, that physical development really is what makes us humans, right? And I think that, it applies also to the younger generation as well.
So Darren, just as we were keeping questions to the end, but there is a question here. Please describe what Snaps Created is. I thought it was appropriate to answer that question right now.
Oh yeah, fantastic. So Snaps would be from the social media application called Snapchat. And a snap essentially is a short video. Generally, it lasts seconds. I don't even think it goes up to more than 30 seconds or even into a minute, unless if that has changed. But essentially, it's a short video. And Snaps really has been a way in which the younger audience have actually been communicating with one another. It's so interesting. It's almost as learning a new language, right? And it might seem so foreign to us, but yeah, whereas we might be familiar with writing a post on Facebook or sending a snap, sending a quote on Twitter. The younger folks, they use Snaps to communicate, and that's what it is. So out of all users, Snapchat has reported that there are 5 billion of these small videos, clippets that are actually created every day.
Great, thank you.
So Ashish, just in terms of moving on, we have all of these kids utilizing all of these apps and so on. I think it's good for us to get a better understanding, in terms of why they interact in this space and how it makes them feel, because we might be thinking that it's all bad, but in truth and in fact, there is some good. This next slide, which again distorts Statista, really brings an interesting point home, because let's put ourselves in their shoes for a minute. Over the last couple of years, and you would find that I draw a lot of reference to over the last couple of years, but I think it's because of the pandemic, we have been forced to really be in that virtual space. But it's not limited to that alone, right? So over the last couple of years, you would find that we would have been forcibly removed, from being able to interact in a face-to-face environment. There were no more malls, there were no more playgrounds, right? There were no more, sporting activities. I mean, Ashish, I'm sure there are many things that you're probably missing, right? That we weren't able to do. Your kids probably weren't able to ride bikes, outside, and these simple things that we would have taken for granted before. Kids, however, still need that space to interact, still need that place to be social. And of course, what a better place to do it than what we've, so aptly coined social media. And what you'll find is that based on these numbers that we're seeing here, they're actually feeling quite good in interacting in that space. 20% of the kids that were surveyed here, and I should let you know, this would have been a survey that would have been done in United States of America, and I believe that their caption was close to 100 and something thousand students. I don't have the actual figures, but you can go to Statista and actually get those figures there. 20% of the students said that they actually felt more confident when they were interacting in that space, right? 16% said that they felt less depressed. than just, maybe sitting at home and not doing anything. 20% said that they felt more popular. And, 25% said that they felt less lonely, when interacting in this space. So it's really, really important for us to understand that, they're probably not just playing a mindless game and scrolling and clicking, it's actually kind of helping them from a mental state.
So Darren, this is actually a little counterintuitive for me, right? This actually paints a very positive picture of social media, and this is from a child's perspective, right? But there are obviously negative impacts as well. Take my own daughter, for example. Now, I cannot be controlling what she sees on social media, what interaction she has 24/7, right, on social media. Far more now with these technologies at their fingertips. My child is now being exposed to information that spans across borders now, across regional and international borders. So surely this can't be the entire story here. This is painting a very positive picture. But what about some of the negatives?
Yeah, I like the good cop, bad cop type of routine there, right? So yeah, and the media and news generally tends to report the bad things, right? And we rarely hear about the good things. So, whatever opportunity cyber safety gets, I like to also report that, there are a lot of positive things that happen, but I hear you completely, that it is a challenge, right? So we need to understand that, a lot of kids really do find some level of comfort, happiness, contentment when interacting in these spaces. This is the moral of the Gen Alphas. I think that's what we refer to them now, Gen Alphas. It's where they socialize. This is where they meet new friends. And think about this. This is where they meet new friends. This is where they date friends. And this is where they even break up with friends without meeting them face to face. That might sound, so foreign to the folks sitting on the conversation today, right? Because we would not have a date without meeting someone and knowing, getting to know them more in a face-to-face level. But that's a kind of reality that we have now. So yes, this is their space, and parents and guardians need to accept that. But I think you had insight into what my next slide is, because
so what just a minute. So what are you telling us, Darren? That this is us as parents. We have to embrace that this is the new reality. This is it.
I know it's a struggle, and I mean, and this next slide, like I said, I think it's something that really brings that home, because majority of parents, more than half the parents said that parenting today is a bit harder than it was 20 years ago, and 20 years ago I probably would even drop that figure down to maybe 10 years ago, right? Or even with this pandemic, maybe 5 years ago. And a lot of parents also believe that social media negatively impacts their teens. And yes, that is correct, right? We are not negating the fact that there are negative implications. Statistics are there to prove that it does have a negative impact on things like their homework, how they actually interact in a social setting in real life. Their inability to get enough rest and sleep, that's also something else that we need to be aware of as well. So I didn't want this to be a doom and gloom presentation, but at the same time, I am happy that you brought it up. So when we looking at the the negative impacts, it's really for us to take a perspective of, okay, did we equip them with the right guidelines, before putting them into this space? Sometimes when I do a presentation, I have a visual of a pool. And in the pool, there is a deep end. And I would ask the kids a question and say, hey, when you were learning to swim, did your parents throw you into the deep end? Now, some of them would jokingly say, yes, that's what they did, right? But we know really and truly that you would start from the shallow, right? And then I would switch another slide that shows the shallow end. And then I would even show them another slide with a young kid with a whole set of floaties on, and he's not going to sink anywhere, right? And then they would all laugh, and they would understand that parents take certain measures to protect their kids. And whilst it might inhibit the initial amount of fun that they might have, it is for them to learn that, hey, if you want to have fun in this environment, which the analogy was a pool, you have to also be safe. Now, we've never done that. And I think it's safe for me to say we've never really done that when we were speaking to kids about interacting on the internet. We just said, hey, there's your access. There's your Wi-Fi password. But we all know that when you have access to that, you have access to everything. If you have unfiltered internet coming in, it's going to be a challenge. They're going to experience content that you would never have brought into the household ever, right? And we really cannot mitigate on that in its entirety. Even with the best of parental controls software, it'll probably still find its way. And that's yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Darren.
No, actually, I was going to say that was one of the reasons why I got into this. Because when my daughter was, very young, and me being an early adopter of technology, they had all of the devices that was available, right? And she was searching for Dora on YouTube. And the video that she ended up finding was not the Dora that you and I know. And that's why I said, hey, this can't be happening. I supposedly have all of the best tools to block content and so on, but, it was able to bypass. So yeah, it's one of the catalysts for the initiative.
I like the analogy of the pool. Although when my dad threw me into the shallow end, even that was too deep for me, right? So the thing is that of course it's very subjective. Different people would have different levels of exposure and understanding of technologies and what's available to them, right? I remember that in 2020 when we had the pandemic, overnight we started telling our children to attend school online and do everything online, and there was very little time to actually prepare for that transformation. And you mentioned that you have, I think Darren, your kids are about like 10 and 14 now. How old are
13 and 16.
13 and 16. I've got a 7-year-old, but what are some of the tools that you employ for protecting your kids online, and what can we do as parents?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why cyber safety has survived along this way is that I practice what I preach. I actually go and try things out, and bring it to the parents, and hopefully that is something that would give a little bit more experience, to us all in dealing with this, because every day something new comes up. Believe you me, there's no silver bullet. Our kids are digital natives. They are the Usain Bolts of technology, and we are probably the Snuffleupaguses, right? Just trying to catch up with technology. It's about really being a parent in the virtual world the same way in which you are in the real world, right? And there are a few tips and tricks that we could look at that could help mitigate it. I'm going to share some of them in this slide to follow. You're quite right. Different techniques work for different individuals, work for different ages altogether. So what I might have done, to assist myself and my kids when they were 7 and 8, those techniques would obviously be different than what you would do and what you would speak on to someone that's older. Yeah. So that's something to bear in mind.
Yeah.
You had a question there?
No, I agreed with you. I said,
okay. No, fine. Yeah. So definitely starting from young, and just getting them to build those habits of good digital etiquette, just knowing exactly what they should be engaging in. That's why age requirements, I think, is something that should be honored. To me, I think that's one area in which we falter in a bit. The social media apps really put age restrictions almost as a gentleman's agreement. There is no real way to block if a child says, hey, I'm actually 13 when they're really 12 or 11 or 5. So that's something that parents need to be cognizant of, and you could monitor that by just looking at what apps they have installed on their phone. You could take a screenshot of what we're seeing here, and this will actually be shared later on. But one of the underlying techniques that I've realized over the years that really, really work is conversation or communication. Simple things as no phones at the dinner table would allow you to uncover a few different techniques. And let me just give you this example. I had a situation where a child was really, really depressed, right? And the parents didn't know because the child was always on the device, even during dinner time. And that was just based on the household's arrangement, the only time when all five members of that family were able to sit in a space together. But they didn't realize that that was a special thing that they had, because that's not the case in many areas. And even when they are able to do that, they didn't have the ability to speak to one another because they were all inside the device. And I'm saying they, because even the parents didn't lead by example. They were also looking on the device. They may have probably been looking at work emails, right? Or trying to catch up on the news for the day. They didn't utilize that time. And long story short, that child actually ended up in a very, very bad place. And what I'm saying is, hey, you had an opportunity to say, hey, let's put on your phones and let's have a chat. Who knows what may have come out? Who knows what the parents might have been able to pick? Because if we look at just what they're posting on social media, and this was actually another example of a very popular influencer in the United States. Parents said that the only way that they interacted with this person was on social media, and she presented a very happy space. However, she committed suicide because she was really depressed. She was unable to handle the pressures of being an influencer. Now, as a parent, you should have been able to have a conversation with her and figure that out. But, not having that opportunity, definitely presents an option. Parents have to be prepared to learn. And whether we want to accept it or not, this is the space that we are going to be interacting in. I have a nice little trick here for parents who, really think that it's out of their league, and that's fair to accept. You must have, or your kids or those who you have to be in charge of must have that cool aunt or uncle or older sibling or cousin that might be in those spaces. Have a chat with them and say, hey, can you just keep an eye out on my son or daughter? Just make sure that, nothing weird happens. You don't see them sharing anything inappropriate. And that's actually related to it takes an online village to raise a child. You might not be able to have your eyes on every single thing that's happening. But, in Trinidad, we have that saying, it takes a village to raise a child, where, you look out for the neighbor's kids, you look out for, this other one, they might encounter themselves in a place where they shouldn't be. But we can take that concept to the virtual space as well. Some of the other things are, pretty straightforward. But the last one that I'll probably want to just talk about is scheduling offline family activities. Now, we often say, yes, well, we're going to probably take a walk in the park or play with puppy this evening or whatever it is. Ashish, if things are not in my calendar, I just don't do it. Right? I live by my calendar. And I actually said, hey, parents, schedule that time. Let everyone know Thursday afternoon is board game time, or let everyone know that Saturday morning, we're going to recreate this whole Saturday morning cartoon vibes, and everyone is going to sit behind the TV, but we're going to interact, we're going to talk, we're going to eat snacks that we probably shouldn't be eating at early in the morning. Those are things that we need to bring back a bit.
Yeah.
Because it will all foster communication. And I think that's where we can easily ask the questions. How are you going? Are you coping online? What's going on? Experience any cyberbullying? And it will come across as just regular conversation instead of prying and poking and entering into the space that is their own without us, being welcome there.
Yeah. So I actually I think we don't have that many people in the audience. If we have about 20 minutes, I think what we can do is we can just open the floor up. If anyone has any experiences that they want to share, you're welcome to share your experiences with respect to your experience with parenting in the digital world, and I'd like to hear from you. I remember a particular Christmas where my parents showed up at my sister-in-law's place with like board games and Ludo and Scrabble and all these different board games, and my sister-in-law has three boys, all have their own tablets, and they were all engrossed in their gaming or whatever it might be. And I told my mom, they're not going to like, the regular board games and stuff. But the thing is that once they started playing, they got hooked
Yeah.
on board games and the physical interaction and the noise and all that. And it was really amazing to see how these kids who are virtually on the tablet all the time were very quickly attracted to having that face-to-face collaborative interaction, and we were able to take them off the tablet, and they had a fun time, with the traditional games and stuff. Sometimes I feel like, okay, the kids these days just don't want to engage in what I used to think was fun back then, but it's not true. It is, yeah, what they crave is that interaction, that communication. Sometimes that face-to-face interaction goes a long way. So
Yeah, I just to add to that, Ashish, I think because they would have been forced into an environment that is predominantly digital and not had the opportunity to experience the activities that maybe we are speaking about. It's not like they don't want to engage. It's just that they aren't aware that those are things that that can bring fun and joy.
Sure.
So it's really up to the parents and the guardians to take that mantle.
We have a comment from Carrie on the chat. I don't know, Carrie, would you like to speak to it? I can read out your comment. It's completely up to you. So she says that I don't have children, but I have seen some parents with young children, and parents pay no attention to their kids as they are so engrossed in their mobile phone. It is so sad and missed learning and attention opportunity. And I wonder how these children will be affected the rest of their lives. And that's a very, very significant, valid comment there, Carrie. And thank you for that.
Carrie, you brought back an example that I personally experienced. My family went out for dinner at a restaurant, and sitting 2 tables away from us was a 3-person family: mom, dad, and a son who was probably 7 or 8 years old. Now they went to a pretty fancy restaurant, so you would have probably looked to enjoy the food and stuff that you might get there. For the entire time, this young guy was on a tablet. There was no communication with him. There was no conversation with him. To be honest with you, Ash, I don't even think he ate. I know the plate was in front of him, but I don't even think he partook in any of the meals. And I brought it to my wife's attention. It's like, I'm just so urged to go and speak. It's like, hey, you're missing out on a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to know when and where. And Carrie, I think that parents really do have an interest in responsibility, and not to use the tablet as a babysitter, in certain scenarios.
Yeah. So is there anyone else from the audience who'd like to share? Feel free to turn on your mic, your camera.
Got a question. Not so much a share, but it's a little bit of a follow-on from what you said, actually. So I know there's lots of research about the impact of all of this screen time and social media activity on kids. Does any of that research include the physical effects? Because, you mentioned earlier, it's like when I was a kid, you were chucked out of the house in the morning, came back when the street lights came on, and we were all over the place running around playing on our bikes or whatever.
Yeah.
That's certainly not true for the modern generation. And it's a very, very different level of physical activity. So I'm kind of interested if there's been any sort of good research on the longer term implications of that, to physical health.
So Andrew, yes, there have been. I will probably not be able to quote the actual research data right now, but I can draw reference based on what I've read. And this is what I use to speak to both parents and kids about. So back in the day, we would have been susceptible to carpal tunnel syndrome, right? And that was when we didn't have proper ergonomical desks and chairs to use and interact with the devices, right? So carpal tunnel syndrome, it was a big thing. There was a lot of folks who had to get operations on their, on their wrists and on their digits and their fingers and so on to remedy that. So it has been a problem that's been pervading use of technology, even back then. Now, there are a few issues, health issues, which would relate to, I'm pointing to the back of your neck here, right? There is a bit of research that was done in Europe where they found that a lot of, well, it would now be young adults who would have been, teens while they were actually doing the research, have problems with that part of their spine because they have been, this way, like bending down towards the device constantly. And when I actually read that research, I was, speaking to my boss, who is CIO at my organization here, and he said he had a similar problem because when he was actually in a particular job, he was on his phone, which was a mobile phone, not a mobile phone, those Britney calls, and he was like this. He would have done his work on the phone for an extended period, and he had a significant neck problems. And it's like, wow, look at how these things happen, So that was one of the issues. Then you have a lot of vision issues as well, right? So you have a lot of kids who may not necessarily have need for spectacles and so on. They have to go get their eyes tested, dry eyes. Now, I think probably the biggest problem might be into an area of depression and dementia due to lack of sleep and rest. So you have a lot of kids who believe that they can survive on 2 and 3 hours of sleep, but that actually has a negative psychological effect on you, right? Coming down to the end of the week, everyone is grumpy and snapping and so on. And it's not only because, I had too much work to do. It's because your body is just not accustomed to that amount of activity. So, Andrew, I think that there is a lot of data to show that, it's psychological and physical effects based on too much use of the devices. So yes, definitely. And Ashish would have shared an article from BCS on mental health issues and so on due to the increase.
So the presentation that we had from Leena Jogi, the last one, Andrew, I just remember that she mentioned quite a bit of physical and mental health issues. So I've put the link to the material on that in case anyone did not see that presentation. It's available there. We have a comment from Dina. Many parents use the device to keep children occupied while they engage in other activities and eyesight issues as well, as you mentioned there, Darren. So yeah, all very valid pertinent comments here. Andrew, sorry, you had a follow-up?
Well, I'm just going to say the one that concerns me longer term, just because I know what effect 2 years of COVID work from home had on me. I guess which is pretty similar to the effect of being a teenager who never goes out, right? Is the cardiovascular piece.
Yeah.
We don't talk about what the long-term impact of not taking any exercise for years at a time might be. And, it will be interesting to see if any research comes out and if there are any sort of increased levels of cardiovascular disease coming down the pipe for us. But,
and, I guess what we have to be cautious about when looking at data from the COVID pandemic era is not to lump everything as an effect of COVID-19, but of just changing lifestyles on the whole. So it's definitely something to look out for. But hopefully the research would take that into consideration as well.
It's going to be interesting. Oh yes, childhood obesity is about childhood. Jokingly at work, we're talking about the COVID-19, as in the 19 pounds you put on during COVID. It's a pretty common problem.
That's talking about obesity. There was a study done in Trinidad. Trinidad actually has a very large prevalence of diabetes, non-communicable diseases, and a study was done in Trinidad with young kids and obesity and the effects on their cardiovascular other systems and so on. And they realized that in the current generation, 2% of children have diabetes, which is a significant amount. And I think I can't remember exactly what was the sample size that they used, but this is we're talking about children in primary school.
Primary school, yeah.
Yeah, primary school's children. 2% was quite a significant number if you think about it.
And the problem is not addressed, which leads to another unfortunate and startling statistic about the high number of amputees that we also have here as well.
And I guess we can save that for another event. It's all good conversation.
I'm just sharing the link, Ashish, in the chat.
Yeah.
This is for the internet addiction test. And I also have a cyber safety quiz that anyone can sign up for. It's really meant for students. I've actually had some university students sign up for it. You actually get a cyber safety certificate at the end of completion of the the digital safety test. So yeah, feel free to share it.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna sign up for that.
Good stuff.
So if there aren't any more questions or comments or anything that you'd like to share, I guess I can close off here. I think thanks, Darren. It was a fantastic conversation. Hopefully we can have you again in the not too distant future. But I think if we were to summarize what are the takeaways from today's conversation, I mean, we talked about the increased use of social media and the applications and so on, what our children are actually doing online, but you also linked it very interestingly to, well, why do they do this, and you saw the statistics were there. Children feel more popular, they feel more connected with others, with their peers, they feel there's a positive, almost a positive aspect to the use of social media from a child's perspective. But then there's another perspective from the parent's perspective, where there's a lot of concern, there's a lot of issues with that excess usage of social media and so on. And then you shared some of the good tips and tricks that we could use, and it all came down really to communication, having that conversation with your kid, increasing physical contact and communication. Is there anything else that we could take away from this?
Well, I mean, I think you did a fantastic job in summarizing, the main points. What I like to say is, sharing the statistics on why they interact in this space helps us to deal with, when we attempt to take away that space from them, and why they make us so upset and annoyed with us, and you're thinking in your mind, well, you're just playing a game. But what they are actually doing is satisfying some inherent need to be wanted, accepted, socialized, be in that group. So that's what you're doing as well, right? So it's about, okay, fine, we need to probably take a break from this. I'm not taking it away from you, but let's try something else. Tell the kids that we're going to do something now, and you'll link back up with them later on, right? So I think once we kind of get a sense that we are invading now on a space that they really engage in, it will help us to address the situation, if there is one, where we believe that maybe they may be addicted to the internet. Now, that word is not used intentionally. We all know what addiction means, right? You would not just tell someone who might have an addiction to a narcotic to stop using it tomorrow and expect success. It's something that often happens with communication and another person there to always look in on. And that's why when we speak about internet addiction, parents have a significant role to play. If you're telling your kids, hey, put on the device, you need to find something for them to do. You need to occupy their time, right? Otherwise, they're going to hide and get back onto the device. So that's where the communication, the socialization, the scheduling of offline activities, all of these things would add towards, a better relationship with the kids, addressing the issues of social media and all of the ills that we see, that we probably didn't speak about all of them, but, the underlying issues. And I think once we cover those, we should be in a better space.
I think that was it was a great talk, Darren, and certainly those things you mentioned were great takeaways for me as well. I never realized 5 billion Snapchats created daily. That was kind of a bit of an eye opener, that one, to me. And you did talk about the positive side, which I think is really important. How they're becoming more confident and maybe less depressed. Some individuals, and I think that's key, as you've said. When you're having those conversations, that there is an upside, and that you don't just keep hammering away with a big hammer, saying, you know, this is the downside of it, when, you know, acknowledgement of what it is they're getting out is good. And yeah, scheduling the time. You know, you mentioned about you live by your calendar. I'm finding that, you know, I think it's my memory as I'm getting older. So I keep noting things down, and every day look at what should I be doing today, right? You know, so I think that's an important takeaway as well. So thank you very much for coming and joining us today and doing that talk. It's very valuable for us. Thank you.
You're very welcome.